There's a question in here from Jacob. With the digitization of law, do you foresee blockchain technology playing an increasingly important role in providing the services Rocket Lawyer offers?
Yes, it's a good question, Nat. I'm glad blockchain has come up. We are looking at blockchain at the moment. We have a small R&D team here in the UK who are working on it, and applying blockchain into to the legal space. Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment. For me, blockchain really is about automating the law, and I think automation of legal services, is one of the main ways in which you can use technology to bring down price, making service provision more efficient, which takes price out. So let's think about an example, which is an example that we've been working on when we can apply blockchain to legal contracts. Really, what you're looking to do is automate the performance on that contract. So let's go back to this idea of me selling you a car, Ali, and we've created a bill of sale for a vehicle, and we want to use the blockchain to make that transaction efficient and to also develop trust between us. So what we could do is we could automate the terms of that contract, put them into a smart contract, and run that on the blockchain. So I know that the DVLA are opening up their platform at the moment to provide APIs. So you can query to find out about the vehicle. Who owns it? Is it roadworthy? Has it got an MOT? Imagine a world where we've got a smart contract which is attached to the legal contract, and that smart contract, the legal contract is a bill of sale between you and me. You're selling a car, I'm buying it from you, right? What do you want to know? You want to know that I'm good for the money, right? And you don't want to hand over the car ideally unless I've got the money and I can pay for it. I want to know that you own that car. I want to know that it's roadworthy and safe. So when I get it, I'm going to get some mileage out of it. So if we have a smart contract attached to a legal contract, the first thing you could do is you could wait until it's told that you are the owner. Yeah. Check with the DVLA. Are you the owner? Yeah, you do own the vehicle. Have you got an MOT on that vehicle? You have. Okay. So I'm good with that now. I know you own it. I could then, take some currency, some fiat currency, pounds, turn it into tokens, into cryptocurrency, put it into a smart contract on the blockchain, hit a deposit, and it could sit there. The money's now held. I can't get it back. You can't access it until something else happens. You now deliver the car to me, but more importantly, you also change ownership. You go onto DVLA and you say you've sold the car. As soon as the smart contract gets a notification that the car's been, transferred ownership, the money can then be released to you automatically. And you've got no control over that smart contract. Is just following a set of rules and executing as all those events play themselves out. So that's a very efficient way in which to build trust between you and me and helping the performance of that contract in terms of ownership, delivery of the goods, payment. So I definitely see blockchain as being a good area for development in the legal industry.
And it's mind-blowing for what lies ahead, really. I did a recording the other day with Chris Vandekool, who's the chairperson of 4J Studios that does Minecraft, the game, and he's a very prominent entrepreneur, and he was basically saying never has the pace of change been this fast, but nor will it ever be this slow again. And he then started to talk about all of these different markets and the technology that lies ahead. So fantastic answer, Mark. Thank you for that. There's another question. In your experience, what have been the biggest barriers to innovation in legal practice?
Biggest barriers. So probably get a little bit controversial here. I'd say one of the big problems is that law firms for a very long time have been run exclusively by lawyers. The whole nature of a partnership, where only lawyers can own, be in the partnership, means that you've basically got an organization that's been run by multiple people who all come from the same discipline, law. And I know that law firms might have an IT person and a finance person, a marketing person, whatever, but those people are very much in a lot of law firms still today on the second table, and then are not allowed to the big table. So the organization is basically being run by lawyers who have all come from the same background, who don't have experience, in these multiple disciplines. Obviously, the ABS rule came in quite a way back now, maybe 10 years ago or more, actually, in the UK, which allowed lawyer ownership. And that's starting to take off in the US now as well. So that allows non-lawyers to actually own part of the firm and get a seat at the table. And so I think that's held things back along. The fact that in any other industry, the executive team of the company will have a financial officer who's got a financial background and has done the finance, right? A marketeer, a chief marketing officer, whatever, a technologist, maybe a product person like me. We've got a chief design officer whose job is, to own the user experience of our products and services. Operations people, accounting, all these different disciplines, you bring them all together and you can really innovate as a company or as any other organization. And I think the fact that law firms traditionally aren't multidisciplinary has really held them back, because they've not been able to get access to all those different perspectives and all that different expertise.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But we don't, alternative business structures have obviously developed down. It's not the same scenario in Scotland here. There were some developments at the end of last year, in fact, that might lead us slightly further down that path.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no doubt that with different disciplines being in the room, as you say, and having a decision-making status, they can drive the business forward in a manner that doesn't happen when everyone's essentially thinking the same way, really.
Yeah. For quite a few years, Google was a fairly tiny company, a search engine. It was being used, but wasn't really growing. And it was all being run by, technology people only. They didn't really have a monetization model. They had no one else really steering the company. So that Google was held back because it was just being run by technologists. And then they brought finance people in and marketing people in, and the advertising model was developed, and suddenly it takes off. You do need that multidisciplinary approach, no matter what industry you're in.
That's a brilliant practical example, because we wouldn't naturally think of a company like Google, for example, being held back in that way, because we think, surely got that all worked out. But I'm sure that as you say, they didn't. So essentially they're all technologists creating a particular type of product. And then they obviously, by bringing in different skill sets and diversity and different thinking, suddenly the whole, everything just widens out and a completely different perspective is gained. That's great. Thank you. Could I ask you this? In the course that we do, as I've said, we're asking students to try to transform practices, to introduce technology. And part of what I say to the students in my group is that you've got to get technology adoption off the runway. So you need to get buy-in, and then you need to perhaps get more ambitious. But part of that challenge is working out what's of substance and what's currently hype, because there's a lot of hype around legal tech. So what would you say are areas should be of practical focus right now? And what do you think is either hype or something that's just too far down the line for anyone to be thinking about in their career at the moment?
I've always been quite skeptical about AI in law, even though I've got an AI background, and I see applications for it, but I don't think it's anywhere as near widespread and significant at this stage as maybe people thought it was 3 years ago, when it was pretty hyped. I think the blockchain's still a long way off to get any real sort of practical use in law, although we are working on it. And I would hope that, given that we've already got millions of customers using Rocket Lawyer every year, if it's applicable, we will find an application for it. Coming back to AI, I think law firms, especially large law firms, get quite a lot out of it. I think AI works really well when it comes to document analysis, and it is using that space really well. And that's to make, lawyers more efficient in large levels. So you're taking a lot of contracts. Maybe you're just taking a new kind of supermarket, shopping center complex. You've got to take all the individual contracts for each of the units in and analyze them all. That's a really big job, which would normally be done by a lot of junior lawyers. And the fact that you can ingest all those, run machine learning over them, pull out a lot of the significant terms and obligations and everything, and focus lawyers' attention on all the tricky bits. That certainly makes things much more efficient, and certainly brings down the cost of providing legal service as a large law firm. How much of that is passed on to the individuals, onto the customers? I'm not sure. We're using, in the AI space, we're using a more traditional type of AI. These days people talk about machine learning a lot, whereas what we've got is an expert system. So that's actually quite old-fashioned AI. It's what I did my PhD about 25 years ago. It's a rule-based system. So the way our document automation works is that we use lawyers to capture rules for how contracts are written, how they are drafted. And then what we do is we then make them available online, and the end user can answer questions. And as they're answering questions, there's this really big kind of tree, and you're traversing down the tree depending on which questions you answer how, and then other questions get asked depending on the way you've answered it. And as we're doing it, filling in the contract, we're drafting it clauses that customize to your circumstances. So that's a piece of AI, pretty basic AI. It doesn't learn, but it's quite powerful. And so I would put that into that kind of automation category, the ability to be able to allow the user to get some of the help of a lawyer, can provide, but automatically through technology. But I think there's only certain limits. I think there's limits to what you can do with AI law, because at the end of the day, what do lawyers do? A lot of advising, understanding circumstances, advising, negotiating. Bots can't really help out in that space very well. They're still too brittle to be able to really have a conversation, even if it's through a chat, and actually provide a great deal of tailored advice. They can certainly signpost you to further reading. So I think there's limits to AI, and I think blockchain, which I suppose is the current hype, is quite a way out before we see some real kind of practical use. But the example I was describing earlier, you could see how that could help to automate some of the inefficiencies of law and build trust between the two parties. But there still needs to be lawyers, to actually draft those contracts in the first place.
Yeah. I love the notion of old-fashioned AI. I love the way you talked about that there, which is just brilliant. Just as you say there, obviously the role of the lawyer as a trusted advisor, strategic advisor, is always going to be there, I think. It's old-fashioned. There's the subtleties of each situation, the client's individual circumstances, and that'll always be required. But anything else that's process-driven is facing challenging times, really. Of that, there is absolutely no doubt.
A term, I don't know if you use it at all on your courses, unbundling, how it became popular a few years ago. It's the idea of that rather than the lawyer doing it all, you kind of unbundle the service and you let technology do some of it. You maybe outsource some of it, or maybe you use paralegals and, lower cost resources to do the simpler stuff. And I'm a strong believer in that, right? So unbundling legal services to bring down the cost of them, right? So one of the most popular places where lawyers get involved with our customers is a customer will use that document automation technology I just described to create a contract, and they'll get to the end of it and they'll review it and go, okay, that's pretty good. I'd really like to beef up the IP here. So because I'm not happy with these standard kind of clauses which are in this contract. I need a lot more protection on that area. So what can you do? Okay, well, you fill in the ask a lawyer, you ask a question, I need some help with the IP on this contract. we can get that document and the question and pass it over to the lawyer. And what's the lawyer doing? The lawyer is stepping in, a contract which has already been drafted, all the data has already been gathered. So you're not paying a lawyer to gather the data and do this first draft. And they're coming in and they're reviewing a draft, and then they can, okay, yeah, the IP, definitely. And I'd certainly beef up the confidentiality stuff, given what they're trying to do. So they come in, do a couple of hours drafting, might cost you £500 or something for a couple of hours, but at least you haven't had to engage them for 2 days. So that unbundling allows the technology to do what technology is good at, gathering data and drafting stuff. And it allows the lawyer to do what the lawyer's good at, which is really understanding the underlying situation of, the partnership that's going on between two parties, and what that contract's going to do at the heart of that partnership. And, the lawyer can come in and advise on the pertinent bits and get it right.
It's like a kind of triage system almost used in the NHS or whatever, isn't it? You're ultimately only eventually going to see the consultant or what the consultant needs to advise you on, rather than the consultant being there at the start.
And we do that. We actually call it triaging. When those questions come in, we have supervisory lawyers, but the first place that those questions go to is our team of paralegals, and they read the question. And often it's like, okay, you probably don't need a lawyer to answer this one because your question is really simple. We've got a guide online. Here's the answer. Read this for further reading. Come back to us if you want more. And people do, but they come back with another question, a more complicated one then, because they've got the basics and they've learned, they've self-educated themselves, and they know enough now to be able to ask what they really need help with. Yeah, we do that triaging as well, and that's another way, to bring down the price.
Yeah. Well, listen, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you about all of this. Genuinely could talk to you for hours. I mean, we have covered some topics, but there's so much more and so much innovation that's going to lie ahead in the years to come. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak to the students. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the law school when I extend thanks to. So thank you very much for that, and we will hopefully speak with you again soon.